Day 1. It was a beautiful, fresh, life-filled morning in the country of Poland. The sun shined, the birds sang, and the season of spring was blossoming. However, the calls of the West and the people of my old school were calling. I hopped on a train to a nearby big city, spent the night with my family, and got up at the ungodly hour of 3:30 a.m. in order to get to the airport on time. I really enjoyed the sights from the air since I haven't flown in a long time. Honestly, I had to keep pinching myself because of the fact that I was about to be in the UK, which seemed like the most unbelievable thing at the time. Considering that I arrived at around 9 a.m., I decided to spend some time studying for a terrifying chemistry exam I had waiting for me upon return after the trip. The time came for my American friends to land, so I raced to the same terminal where I got out. I stood there for about 45 minutes until I got a call from one of the teachers asking me where I was. It turned out that they landed in a completely different part of the airport where I had no idea how to get to. So they had to send a tour guide to come and get me. After all the complications, I finally made it to the members of my school and we all got into the bus. Seeing them again was a surreal experience, and mixed with suddenly driving through the amazing city of London made me feel as if I was really dreaming. We saw a ton of brick buildings, nice architecture, red buses, and a lot of interesting things on the streets. It began to become late. We went to the hotel eventually, but this was only the beginning of the experience. Day 2. We got back on the Magic School Bus and rode over to the city of Westminster, where we went on a walk, took photos at the Buckingham Palace, then drove around some more through that part of the city. We saw St. Paul's Cathedral, which was amazing for me, because I loved Mary Poppins growing up. There was this art gallery with so many paintings, though I kind of got lost inside. We spent the rest of the day looking around in different shops. We ate in this really cool restaurant. I still have no idea what I ate, but whatever it was definitely worth the money. The amount of potential fashion hiding in each store was overwhelming, though there was no way I was going to pay £70 for a t-shirt. To finalize our day, we ate some traditional fish and chips, which I found very enjoyable sitting with my friends and music teacher.
Like you can only get 8 wrong.
Day 3. The era of fine dining and souvenir shopping was put to a break, because today we had an important mission to face: the Tower of London. We stepped out onto the streets of culture and beauty, strapping our reindeer to our flesh, ready for anything that the skies were about to throw onto us. Once we got into the area, I was mesmerized by all the displays around the castle, though there were some attractions outside as well. I actually got lost at this point and was frantically running from one side of the tower to the other, looking for my group, which was mostly ready to go. But I wasn't the last one to show up, so that at least took a lot of stress off of me. I took this selfie in the middle of sprinting, but a good photo is a good photo. I don't care how stressful the situation is. The bus stole us back from the captivity of the castle and bestowed us upon the bankside where the Globe Theatre was waiting, none other to be our next attraction. Getting ready to see a Shakespeare play in the literal area where Shakespeare plays were first performed was something that simply couldn't fit in my mind. But our bodies came first and we needed to go eat lunch. I felt very healthy after eating this salad, and it was a nice environment with so many of us around this table. We left the restaurant and entered the Globe Theatre, ready to face any amount of rain in order to see this spectacular production of The Tempest. Recording wasn't allowed during the performance, so you won't get any footage in this vlog. But what I can say was that watching it made us feel as if we were in the play, because the rain was pouring on us, just like the mighty tempest the characters were facing. At a certain part in the play, the clouds above us broke and we were immersed by sunlight. We had our dinner at some booths with food from all over the world. Here's some footage of our drama teacher pumping some iron at a random outdoor gym we found. After walking around some more during the sunset, we finished off our day with a candlelit church concert of Handel's Messiah. As a classical musician, the opportunity of hearing Messiah in person for the first time in my life was like none other. Once we left the church, we were suddenly stricken with an experience that none of us were prepared for. An enormous rainstorm attacked us from above and filled the streets around us with wind and darkness. London was now showing us its true colors. With the grace of a miracle, we all made it safely and in full pieces into the bus and returned to the hotel. I talked to my parents on the phone while sipping a nice cup of English tea. The fourth day of this adventure was off to a terrible start for me. The storms from the gods above, as well as the exposure to long-forgotten American viruses, led me to sickness. Nevertheless, I decided to bite the bullet because there was no way I was going to miss the acting class waiting for us. We arrived at our acting class and immediately started off with getting Shakespeare lines and doing exercises with them. Every moment reminded me so strongly how I missed acting class in high school. Being with everyone again and in a British acting studio was something that really stood out to me during this trip. We continued with seeing some more marvelous architecture, but the next attraction was riding the Eye of London. Okay, so I knew that something called the Eye of London existed before I came to London, but no one prepared me for what this experience was actually like. We all got into one moving capsule and began to ascend, immediately seeing this perfect view of Big Ben and the River Thames. We took some of the best photos that we got from the entire trip, and every second mesmerized me beyond belief. Next, we stopped by a fancy restaurant, where we were treated to some tea, sandwiches, and pastries.
Hey! Wait a minute. Hello, mate.
I broke off with the drama teacher and another student as we explored an outdoor shopping center for the next few hours. We discussed some dilemmas regarding the trip. The adrenaline was already running as I saw the sign entering the theater, and we were all filled with hype. The play was awesome, and I enjoyed every moment.
This is so exciting.
Yeah, we're gonna see Wicked.
I know, it was my first time.
Yeah, mine too.
I'm excited.
I had a lot of fun with the songs remaining stuck in my head for the next few days. Our journey back to the hotel was filled with a karaoke night in our bus, which was actually an attraction in and of itself. Day 5. We got up at the early hour of 4:30 and slowly prepared ourselves to say goodbye to the United Kingdom. We drove with some last beautiful views of London with the sunrise until we arrived at the train station. Several security and passport checks awaited us. But as for me flying from Poland, and them flying all the way from California, it was merely a walk in the park for us. We climbed on board the Eurostar train and began to depart. Other than the views from the outside, it was pretty surprising to me how similar it felt to a regular Polish train. There's also not really too much you can see going through the canal, considering that it's all closed in. But the utter idea of riding a train from the island into France is still something that can barely fit in my mind to this day. Once we got off in Paris, it was a different feeling from the start. Of course, people were speaking in a different language, but things like the city layout seemed more compact, and even eventually the culture of the people appeared as different. It would be a sin to neglect the fact that we were all unprepared for the heavenly architecture that surrounded us from every corner. We walked by foot to a French sandwich shop where I got this ginormous baguette with ham. We walked through the city and arrived at the Louvre. We went inside and got to see hundreds of items in the collection. We started off with the Egyptian artifacts, then moved on to the royal rooms. The amount of time we had here was not nearly enough to see everything, but everything we did get to see was incredible. Walking around some more, we only saw more and more of the amazing architecture everywhere we turned. This right here is the Seine River, which I would say is one of my favorite places in Paris. We ate and got to the hotel, just like the regular routine of every day prior. To be entirely honest, the first day here in France presented itself as a massive culture shock for me. We were just in a country where the language was understandable for us. And for me personally, after living in Poland for the past 8 months, it didn't seem too different from the US. Considering this, suddenly arriving in such a different area could be argued as understandable. I try to always look at things from different perspectives, meaning that something that appears different to us doesn't need to be labeled as something we dislike. Sometimes the answer isn't to change the world around us, but instead to change ourselves. Day 6. One of the attractions on our list today was visiting the castle of Versailles, though we actually weren't sure if we were going to be able to go there, because during that same day, the workers of the castle were to protest. Luckily, we received word that the castle remained open, so we were still going to go to see some of Europe's most gorgeous architecture. It was touching for me to see the Notre Dame Cathedral on the way there. It's sad to not have seen the inside, but you can observe the renovation that is taking place, and hopefully there is a bright future ahead. Here we were, standing in front of the most staple figure of France and one of the most famous locations in Europe, the Eiffel Tower. Sure, you can tell me all you want that it doesn't look good during the day, but this was my first time seeing the thing in person, so let me be happy. We had another nice, healthy lunch and went off to see Versailles, which we were all waiting for. I'm just gonna say right off the bat that all the things we thought were amazing before coming to Versailles were like specks of dust compared to what we were about to see.
We're at Versailles. So,
Or Versailles.
yeah, like
Look at it,
actually.
look at it.
Look at this. This is amazing.
There's a pigeon.
What lied in this castle was about to knock our socks off, and there was nothing that could prepare us for it. Every room was filled with history, beauty, and that sort of European marvel that caught the hearts of us all. It reminded me of some of the things I learned about in AP European history a few years back. In fact, I sort of wish I went on this trip before taking that course, because all of a sudden, it all just seemed so real rather than just some pages in a textbook. The interior of the castle is amazing, without doubt, but there is no way on earth that we can ignore the garden that stretches from the outside of it. I mean, I wasn't really ready for the nudity, but the statues are surely not something you could just find everywhere. And the fountain was also very picturesque. A few more glimpses of Versailles were given to us, until we headed straight back into the bus and moved forward. There wasn't too much else we did during that day, but I think both the Eiffel Tower and Versailles all in one day isn't something that the average person gets to see on a day-to-day basis. Day 7. I was fully awoken this day by seeing my last name just casually displayed above a building. Am I French? Do I belong here? Well, at this point, no one is certain, but that was only one of many more surprises waiting ahead. We showed up at the Montparnasse Tower, where we were about to receive a breathtaking view of the city of Paris. It's one thing to experience a foreign city, driving and walking around, but being able to overlook everything from a high point, as this, really changes one's perspective. I guess it's worth mentioning at this point that we were actually on the tour with 2 other schools from Missouri and New York, so we were around them a lot during the attractions, and often at meals as well. After seeing some more architecture, we went to attend a French art class. This was an experience that stood out from most of the attractions throughout the trip, because it was something that was hands-on and required our creativity for its fulfillment. The area we were at was extremely picturesque, and it gave the perfect Parisian aesthetic for the visual arts. We saw some more sights from the bus, just as always, then got some time to walk around. I broke off with my drama teacher and a few other students to go see an old church. The mix of history, architecture, and religion made the environment very peaceful. I've always adored exploring churches in Europe, so this one was none other than an incredible sight. We went off to dinner where what we ate was essentially a snack, but whatever it was, it tasted spectacular.
Kira, what do you feel about the situation right now that your sister here is having like way too much fun? Like,
She spent $80 at the last store.
oh wow, $80. She spent $80 on the last 80 euros.
Yeah, we don't talk about it. And it's more in American money.
Wow, she's having too much fun.
When
isn't
in
she?
France.
Yeah, when in France.
Now, let's not ignore the elephant in the room here. During the span of the trip, we climbed the Eye of London, the Tower in Paris, countless amounts of stairs and escalators. But the most important tourist attraction remained unclimbed, and was none other than the Eiffel Tower itself. You know, there's something odd about the fact that the first thing that comes to everyone's mind when they think about Paris is the Eiffel Tower. I mean, okay, I know this is an unpopular opinion, but I mean, it's a city with places of history stretching back hundreds of years ago, filled with art, culture, and uniqueness. But the most important thing for everyone is going to see a tall metal stick. Nonetheless, it's still a nice place to see, and the views are one of a kind. The darker it became, the more magical the city and the tower itself appeared. I started to get a little emotional during this part because, well, it was a very romantic and contemplative place to be. Okay, so this is a quick update from Polish Adam. Don't worry, we're about to go back to Paris.
but I just really wanted to take a moment to emphasize how stressful of a night this was for me. Okay, you see, this was by far the most stressful night of the trip, and probably one of the most stressful nights of the year. So what happened basically was that I found out about this opportunity to go to the very top of the Eiffel Tower. We just found out about this, that it was even an opportunity. But the downside was that in order to go there, you would have to go back from the second floor to the bottom, purchase tickets, go back to the second floor, and then take an elevator to go to the top, which would take a long time. So a few people and I did our best to do this in the amount of time that we had. However, me personally, I didn't catch up. Well, once I bought the ticket and went to the top, or to the second floor, I didn't get into a point of the line where I would have made it in time. So I finally decided to get out of the line, which was embarrassing because I had to climb over this rail and everyone was looking at me. But I got to the other line to go on the elevator back down. The line took a very long time, and once I finally made it to the bottom of the Eiffel Tower, it was just time. It was just 7:30 or whatever time we had to be there. So at this point, I was just trying to find where we got off the bus in the first place before we started climbing the Eiffel Tower. However, it was dark at this point, so everything looked different. So I was running around frantically. The more I ran, the less I knew where I was. Eventually, I was on the phone with my teacher. They were all waiting for me. Everyone was in the bus except for me. And I had no idea where I was. My phone was dying. I only had Wi-Fi from the tower, which was not working very well. Every time I stopped running, people would walk up to me and try to start selling me things. I had to keep running because of that. It was terrible. And then eventually, they just couldn't wait anymore because they were parked in like a place where they couldn't wait. So they had to just leave without me. The teacher stayed behind, and the teacher and I finally found each other at this one point, which still took a while. And I was so embarrassed. I was actually really a little bit happy that I didn't get onto the bus, because that would be so embarrassing to walk on while everyone would stare at me, and I was so scared of that. So the teacher and I basically had to take an Uber back, which I felt so bad. It was the whole time I was just thinking, everyone is mad at me, it's terrible, but you know, it was a night, it happens, you know, what happens in Paris stays in Paris, and we got through it. Anyway, back to Paris. I hope you enjoy.
Today was our last day in Paris, as well as our last day of the trip. This day was mostly filled with walking around a part of the city, with lots of stores, and of course, doing some shopping. It was a good opportunity for me to get a few more souvenirs, which I'm really happy I decided to buy. At this point, we were so used to the marvelous architecture that everything around us looked pretty normal. If these streets were the first things we were to see when we first arrived, then we would all be mesmerized. But after places like the Louvre and the Castle of Versailles, we pretty much felt like professional Europeans already. I practically glued myself to the small group of people I was with, doing anything to avoid repeating the horrors of what I was still processing from the previous night at the Eiffel Tower. I treated myself to this marshmallow chocolate thing while I proudly wore my Paris hat and definitely looked like a local and not some American tourist walking down the sidewalk.
Okay, so we were just like in this like marketplace, and you see it was very crowded. Like we were there to get food, but like it was so crowded.
People in France. Everyone in France is in that place.
Yeah, it's like the population in that was so big. But yeah.
That's it.
Right when we thought we had all the complications and stressful part of the trip behind us, we realized that a bag was left behind at a bench where we were sitting before. So we had no choice but to sprint back to find it. Now, let me say, this was horrible timing, because we only had 15 minutes till we had to be back at our meeting point, and we were still a while away. Once we got to the bench, a person was sitting there with the bag right next to them, and we tried to get it back, but they refused to give it to us and started telling this girl behind them in French to call the police. We grabbed the bag, making sure to be 100% certain everything in it belonged to us, then hurried the fridge out of there to avoid any further complications. Bolting as fast as our legs could carry us, we somehow made it to our meeting point exactly on time. It was a stressful event for sure, but we still had a heavy itinerary for the final day, so we needed to take a deep breath and continue. We walked up a set of stairs to see this amazing basilica, which unfortunately I don't think I'm going to try to pronounce the name, but it is a gorgeous basilica with another amazing view from its outside. We walked around a little more into some shops for the last time, where I got this cool music box. We had our last dinner at this super fancy restaurant. Honestly, I would rate the food in Paris with very high numbers, because everything we ate had really good quality to it. The dessert we had in this restaurant was also pretty interesting. It's another item to go on my list of I have no idea what I just ate, but it had a really nice taste. Though everything was almost over, the last, most exciting, and most jaw-dropping attraction was still waiting for us. This was the most memorable, majestic, and one of the top beautiful things that we got to experience. We went on a boat on the River Seine and drifted across Paris. The day became night, the buildings shined, the sunset glowed, and the beauty of Paris met the highest fruition beyond what I believed I could see. We rode under the most romantic bridge of the city, saw many attractions that we had seen before from a different perspective, but the staple and final view from the boat was the lighting of the Eiffel Tower. Going on this trip really brought me back to a state of being that I thought I had left behind in the past. I was with the people from my home country, becoming someone I was before, all in a completely new and foreign place in the world. The emotions and experiences that were thrown onto me all at once during this trip are impossible to describe in words. I will miss London and Paris, but the hardest things to let go of were the people of my old school, with whom I felt a deep connection with. Even more so after living several months abroad. Though these feelings were as strong as ever, the winds of change blew once again, and the moon of hope gave a reassuring shine from its throne in the night sky. Poland was calling me back, and it was time to return to the new life I was building for myself in this country. Nevertheless, it's impossible to say goodbye to one's homeland forever. So, I guess I'll have to see you next time in part 2, returning to California. Until then, safe travels. Work hard, do what makes you happy, love those around you, and good night.